This week on the show, we interviewed and brought on Mike Dudas, who is the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Button, a payment startup out of New York. Before this, Mike worked at Google Wallet. He worked at Venmo, Braintree, PayPal. He's been around the block, a lot of really great payment experience. And we talked to him about all this. We hear his stories from working inside these companies, his take on the future. We learn all about Button. A truly fantastic conversation. If you have any comments or suggestions, ways we can improve, as always, please do get a hold of us. We really enjoy hearing those, and we hope you enjoy. Thanks. All right, hello, everyone. This is another week on Around the Coin. We have Mike Dudas on the show, as well as Brian, myself, and Faisal. Really excited to have Mike on, seasoned payment expert, really all-around great guy. So thanks, Mike, for joining us today, and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
So I know sort of the pre-show context, Brian and Mike had known each other for a while, gone out. So Brian, what's the lingering thing? What conversation would you want to start with?
Gosh, I mean, Mike has got to be one of the best minds in payments. And I thought for a long time one of the more underutilized minds in payments. And now I think he's marshaling his energies into this great company called Button. But I'll tell you, it's really the history and what he's doing today. I think what he's doing today is probably a lot more exciting than the history. But how did you start, Mike? I mean, what brought you into this whole thing we call payments?
Absolutely. So I was working at Google, and it was 2010. And up to that point, the first 8 to 10 years of my career had worked primarily in advertising and media. And Google's a pretty phenomenal company in the sense that, it's one of the few places where the company is in so many different lines of business and is really open to letting folks, who have exhibited skill in one area, explore another area and really develop themselves there and try and build new businesses. So I switched from working on Google's music business, which I did for the first 15 months there, to a new project called Google Wallet, which, was an exceptionally ambitious project and a product that is still, gaining momentum and has taken a few different forms over the years, and I think is really finding its footing, primarily, as a mobile on-device payments product, but jumped into the payments world in 2010, pardon me, and really haven't looked back since. After spending 2.5 years working on Google Wallet, which we can talk more about, jumped to Braintree Venmo, which was and still is one of the most exciting companies in mobile payments from both a merchant perspective and a consumer-facing perspective. PayPal acquired Braintree Venmo last year, and post-acquisition, I co-founded a company called Button that is, also in the mobile commerce space, broadly defined, not specifically mobile payments, but definitely has a payments element, which we can talk about. So it's been quite a ride. It's been about 5 years, and 5 of the most exciting years in the payments industry. Although I'm sure folks say that every 5 years.
Well, actually, it is. I mean, Mike, you really were at the precipice of the big changes. Let's talk about the early days of Google Wallet. I mean, what was it like? I mean, you guys were, kind of throwing all these different ideas. I've heard from insiders, you're throwing a whole lot of different ideas up. Talk about the early team and the dynamics and, and maybe reference that to how Apple Pay came out and the early innovation you guys were reaching for actually wound up manifesting later on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the long-term vision for Google Wallet is one that's fundamentally a very strong vision. So basically an operating system based or OS level, payment system, mobile payment system that works across any environment that a consumer would want to pay, whether that be in-store, whether that be contactless, whether that be a remote payment from a mobile device. And I think, those things are starting to merge and will continue to over the coming decade. But I think it became pretty clear that the go-to-market approach, so an NFC-based, secure element provisioning credentials from a TSM, without owning the entire hardware and software stack was challenging, right? Trying to bite off a tremendous amount, and in order for that to succeed right off the bat, you need a lot of cooperation from a lot of folks, from issuers to card networks to mobile networks, to merchants, to consumers, just a lot of things had to fall right. And we learned just a tremendous amount that I think is really valuable to Google today.
Did you feel early on that the carriers would be, what they wound up being to Google Wallet? I mean, almost impinging upon its early success?
I think it's clear that it was a market that was evolving very quickly, and it wasn't readily apparent in 2010. What the specific, who was going to compete directly, who was going to collaborate, and I think candidly, Google moved the market forward by moving very, very fast, rapidly. Yeah. Getting a product in the market and pilot in a time frame that is like unfathomable. Whether that turned out to be accretive in the very near term for Google, I'm not sure, but for the ecosystem as a whole, I think it really got folks moving towards, again, a vision that is very similar to what you see developing in the market today.
Well, it's interesting getting large retailers like Macy's and Jamba Juice and a few of these other companies on board with Google Wallet early was a monumental task. I mean, obviously, Apple is taking advantage of that infrastructure that Google actually helped build, the NFC.
Absolutely. So I love using Apple Pay at my local Duane Reade, which is a deal that we did back in 2011. Yeah. And it's proven to be I think a value add for Walgreens and Duane Reade, laying the infrastructure that Apple Pay is able to take advantage of, and that Google Wallet today is able to take advantage of. And it's kind of funny to see Google came out of the gate, did a tremendous amount of PR marketing in a much earlier phase, 2011. Yeah, and I think you see that happening 3.5 to 4 years later with Apple. I think the market is more ready. I think, look, it's easier. They're using issuer and network standards and have a lot of cooperation there versus the Google Wallet structure, which is I think still a proxy transaction.
Mike, you think? I wonder how much the consumer side plays into it. Assuming all else was set up, is there? Because I'm sort of thinking now versus 2010, right? And sort of the differences in behavioral psychology of people, where you could explain, it's much easier to explain to your friend next to you if you say it's kind of like Venmo, but you pay the merchant, right? Or there's more analogies to make for people that they're more comfortable exchanging money through the phone by holding it up to something else. Whereas 4 years ago, I wonder if that would have been the same scenario, even if assuming Google had all the other pieces lined up.
Well, I think that's right, but I also don't want to talk about Google Wallet as if it doesn't exist. I mean, it's getting more usage, is my understanding, than it did in 2011. And when you hear stats like 2/3 of mobile payments in market are happening, via Apple Pay, I mean, I have to imagine, I don't know this for sure, but I'd have to imagine a large percentage of the other third is Google Wallet. So, and I think the numbers overall are still not huge. So I think where Apple has been successful is clearly on the marketing front, clearly on the really seamless consumer experience front, and frankly it solves a real problem, right? And it's fairly straightforward in that it's only payments today. I tap to authenticate, and it's pretty easy and simple, and it just helps me pay, and I walk out of the store. The story is very clear, concise, and straightforward for the consumer, to get to your point, Mike.
So, you obviously were trailblazing back then. Were there any other standards you were looking at, QR codes, other types of, transport mechanisms to get merchants paid?
Yeah, I was not. So the way that, these products are sort of incubated at Google is that new products. It's typically or almost always an engineering initiative, right? So, sure. So I actually didn't join the team until until the technology was ready to be commercialized. So, when I joined in 2010, the lead engineers and the guys who were the founders of the project, and the product, Rob Van Beer and John Wall, were well along the path. I know they did a tremendous amount of research into what technology to use, and considered all alternatives for sure. But NFC, certainly it made the most sense, and I think there's been a sort of an up and a down in the popularity of NFC. I'll admit to myself that basically I thought in 2013 I was kind of questioning whether it was kind of a dead technology. I mean, certainly if Apple wasn't going to support it, it was, right. But it became clear that, look, Apple has the customers who are going to be early adopters for any type of technology like this. They're shopping at the places where it's going to be available. They have the tendency and the predilection to try and be engaged and interested in new technology. As soon as they embraced NFC, I think that was the kickstart that the ecosystem needed.
Mike, I have a question on the Google Wallet. Since Google has got its foot in so many markets, how come they didn't extend the wallet to those markets immediately?
So it's a whole set of different issuer relationships, carrier relationships, merchant relationships. We were looking at other countries, but look, it was a Herculean task to launch in a couple of cities. Never mind, because even today, the physical landscape is not wired for in-store payments. There are very few NFC terminals, and to make this the type of to make a mobile payment system work, you really do need merchant marketing or issuer marketing in this case, right? The banks are the ones doing most of the marketing on behalf of Apple Pay right now, and without that, it's pretty hard to launch even in a pilot, 5 cities in the same country with all those ecosystem players I mentioned. Never mind a whole new set in another country.
But the Google brand is so powerful. You go to, let's say, for example, South Africa or New Zealand. Well, not New Zealand. That's South Africa. And you say, I want to, go deploy a Google Wallet. Which bank would like to work with me? I'm sure you'll find plenty of takers.
Yeah, it was certainly contemplated, but I think it was pretty clear that let's try to make this work in the U.S. first, and that's Google's home territory, and go from there. Now, I can't speak. I wouldn't be surprised if something more experimental happens, where, let's say, Google. I have no inside knowledge, but I wouldn't be surprised today to see Google do something like what you're talking about. Hey, where there's an area where payment technologies are not set in stone like they are in the U.S., and perhaps there's an opportunity to leapfrog. But that wasn't contemplated at the time.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, Faisal, of we had Joaquim Ayuso, the CEO of Quapay, and he sold a company. It was basically the Facebook of Spain for a few $100 million, and then he came over to Santa Monica, started this mobile payments company, essentially doing a similar thing to Level Up with in-store payments, and they would put in their little device. But they hit a lot of friction here, so they launched down in Chile, and apparently Chile had a huge adoption for it, and they were really excited to be working with a fancy California startup. Over there. Yeah, they really are. But they do have that DNA. The whole company's Spanish, and they have that sort of Latin roots. So probably a bit of an advantage if you and I were to try to do that. But it
have they been able to spread? Have they had any success going beyond Chile?
Yeah, fuel dealers was their primary focus, and I think they have 80% of all the fuel dealers in the country. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, and I know they have a ton of fuel dealers, and that was probably 6 months ago. So I'd imagine more now, as well as a lot of the Walmart.
It was
terminals.
A great focus. It was great focus. And that brings us back to merchant adoption. And my thesis has always been with any wallet or payment startup is that if you try to own every element of the ecosystem and not work with but work against every element, you're doomed for failure because there's too many moving parts. The success of Apple Pay is that banks, ISOs, merchants, processors, equipment providers, everybody is energized and promoting this ecosystem. Whereas if you look, and Google was close to that, but if you look at some of the other initiatives, it was like, I want to own the merchant account, I want to own the equipment, I want to own the customer, I want to own the data, And, and thankfully, we're not in that world, because nobody wants to live in that world where it's only one company owning every aspect, at least even in some merchant segments. So I think Google started with that, but I think they failed to connect to different elements of the ecosystem to really energize them, to get down to, 750,000 merchant account sales reps that are out in the field. These people literally see merchants face to face. They would literally plug in an NFC reader if it was available. And those areas were never utilized, and Apple's utilizing them today. So, that's one of the elements of success in my view.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, I think the biggest gap right now is still the merchant one. I think anybody would probably say that. You've seen CVS, you've seen, I believe, Rite Aid and some other folks say, hey, we're turning off our terminals and we're not going to accept NFC payments. I think that
that's
Apple
a political move. That's a political move, right, Mike?
It's clear that there's a long history, right, of merchants not being super stoked about the way that the forms of payment, the way folks are paying in their stores. Now, can they control that? No. I mean, that's been made readily apparent. Can they attempt to influence it in a pretty strong way and make things take longer to happen? Absolutely. And I think, look, there's some real issues here, of course, certainly on the cost of payment side and on the data and information side. There's obviously not an ability for a store brand card to work, which, for a lot of retailers in specific segments like department stores, that could be 30 to 50% of your payment volume.
Yeah, but Mike,
loyalty cards aren't supported.
That'll be part of
those
Apple
things
Pay
can
in
be
the
solved.
future. Yeah. I think it's fear, though, right?
So the last thought there, though, is like Radio Shack went out of business, right? Like they were a partner of Google Wallet a few years ago. The time horizon to say that Apple Pay is going to have something available in 3 years is not something that is super reassuring in a cutthroat and brutal retail environment. So I think there are still gaps that others could potentially take advantage of. Or
what about
you're
optics?
Seeing merchants themselves go with, sorry.
What about the optics, though, right? So if you're sitting back and Mike, you've seen a lot go down in this industry. What are the optics on a consumer level when you have a merchant denying using a technology that costs exactly as much as if they handed them over a physical card?
They're not good.
The optics here is not good. No,
not at all. And I'm not. I think that a lot of merchants, if you said, hey, we'll come in and we'll pay for all your terminal upgrades and all your system upgrades and we'll support all your data needs, I think they would do it. Forget cost of payment, I really think it's about, it's a complex infrastructure and complex data situation and system situation. And in certain merchant segments, that's more important. In the segments that you're seeing, like Whole Foods doesn't have a loyalty program today. Folks like McDonald's care deeply about speed and convenience, Subway, speed and convenience, versus cost of payment. Hey, can I get you in and out happily? So I think you can look at the merchant segments and see where there's a really strong value proposition today and where, to your point, Brian, Apple Pay might have a stronger one than others in a couple years. I mean, do you really sincerely believe that there's going to be a solution for store brand cards and deep loyalty and data analytics in the next six months?
Worldwide Developer Conference, we'll see the beginnings of the loyalty. But loyalty is an opportunity for brilliant startups to intercede, right? So if we're looking at the Apple Pay, and I've already seen 5 startups that are working on this. One I'm going to meet next week. They're flying out. It's blown my mind. VC called me up, said, listen, you got to meet these guys. But basically, if you assume that the network, the Internet of Payments is NFC, then let's take that as an acceptance point. Then what can we build around it as entrepreneurs and creative thinkers to make loyalty those different layers of loyalty and reward systems and the data analytics that merchants want. Apple's not against that. They just don't want it to ride on the back of the credit card transaction.
Yeah.
And so we have things like iBeacon. We have other in-app scenarios, things we'll talk about that Button can do. There's so many opportunities to build around the infrastructure, but there's too many people that I think are brilliant that have their arms folded and they're taking sort of a view of, wow, Apple already shut down the entire opportunity chain here. I don't know what to do. I wanted to make a wallet and I can't do it now. And to me, that's the wrong thinking. So,
well, do you have any insight into what type of a loyalty framework will Apple make available, I guess, to developers? I mean, that's the key question. Are they going to have a stored value system, a point system, an intelligent points optimizer, a campaign management system that you can
all
build
the
on
above?
Top of?
All the above. See, basically, what Apple's going to do, and we'll separate the two different elements. Element number one is store credit cards. Absolutely going to be done. That was one of the major things that's holding Starbucks back from adoption. Obviously, they live on that. And Apple's
so is it a new form? Will I have to have a new stored value format and a new issuing bank and all that to work with Apple, or will they support my existing schema?
That's where it becomes complex from a programmable API standpoint. Now, you can ride on the existing infrastructure that NFC created, and on the other end, either your processor or whoever's doing your back end can interpret that encrypted token as your store credit card. Now, that's not a difficult thing. I mean, it's old technology. I mean, it's technology from 2000. So larger stores will have no problem getting into that element. Now, on a smaller level, on regional stores and things of that level, you could probably create a sideline stored value card that communicates through BLE and things of that level, but not properly within the secured element and the tokenization schema that Apple's created for Touch ID and what we're calling Apple Pay. So that's definitely coming. The APIs are going to be tangentially connected to Apple Pay. They're not going to say, okay, you can just plug into Apple Pay through an API and go at it. They're going to be notifications that will take place inter-app or in the deep levels of OS, which will communicate to iBeacon and BLE so that there is recognition on a micro-location level that something just took place. So I really believe the loyalty aspect in physical retail is the main signaling of that is going to be BLE and iBeacons. And on some merchants, it'll be through the NFC tokenization schema.
So I get the tech. The thing that I think is important, though, is the program design. And I'm just wondering, is this, API that you're talking about and the schema and basically the capabilities of Apple's loyalty framework going to be, able to support a highly customized loyalty program, the type of data exchange and segmentation. So I haven't seen certainly or heard any, I've heard rumors of an Apple loyalty program, but haven't heard or seen anything much beyond that. I'm excited to see it.
I just have a chicken foot and a crystal ball, and that's all I'm doing here. And if it worked, kind of float around. If it worked back in 2010. They nailed
payments, so I'd say they nailed the payments design. So I would definitely have a bias towards agreeing with you that they'll nail loyalty design if anybody can. But I think it's harder to platform, loyalty.
Oh yeah.
Than it is payments.
But see, that difficulty to me creates an amazing opportunity for many, many startups. I mean, if you look at the Apple micro-location scenario when you walk into the Apple store right now, I mean, you have lock screen notification in a lower left-hand corner of your screen. That is going to become a much more richer communication mechanism. So your micro-location, as you get in through the door of the business, there's going to be a lot of stuff that there's a lot of stuff you're already telling a merchant just carrying a recent iPhone. It's an iBeacon already. And a merchant can already start taking some forms of information from that and harvesting it. Now, identifying that iBeacon to a particular transaction, that's where the API is. And everything else can be built around it. Because all we need to do is identify that person with permission. Of course, Apple's not going to do this without a great deal of sign-off from the consumer saying, okay, I'll let this merchant under this circumstance know that I perform this transaction to this API. And so that will enrich an app layer, which I think is going to become very robust, very and very rich for the merchant and the consumer. You can get down to locations within a store. I mean, in say a Whole Food settings, you'll know if you went to the food section, prepared food section, or if you went over to checkout, or if you went over to the wine bar. I mean, you'll have that sort of pinpoint locality. And if you see what Apple's doing with micro-location, I think it makes a lot of sense. It is also part of their anti-Google campaign, if you will. I mean, the idea is to try to shunt people via the OS right to the merchant and emancipate a payment right there. And I think that's the beginning of it. But again, those pieces have to be built. The developers have to have access to it. I think we'll see the beginning of it in June at the Worldwide Developer Conference. But Apple's going to go very slowly. And to your point about waiting 2 or 3 years, I don't think it's going to be that long. But it's not going to be as quickly as I would like, or as the rest of the world. But
hey, Brian, do you think could Apple build a moat in any sense to where there is no possible entry for other players in the space? I remember we were talking about in the iBeacon show, I think it was the NFL 49er stadium, or one of the stadiums were launching specifically the Apple Beacon technology in there. I can't imagine that a stadium's going to go through the same process twice with implementing some of the hardware. Is there hardware they could put in, I guess, not in the merchant side, but in other facilities like stadiums or completely different areas where it blocks everyone else out? Or is there always going to be that ubiquitous or the potential for other players to get in the space?
I mean, if we're talking about being consumer friendly, I certainly hope that that's not the case.
Listen, Beacon technology is an open standard, as NFC is. And, we have to really look at Apple's, thinking on what they're doing. By choosing NFC, they knew that they were going to rise the waters in the harbor for everybody who adopted NFC, including Google, including, Softcard, ISIS, to some extent. And so it's actually a good idea. And if you really study game theory, it's a good idea to have multiple players within any ecosystem you're creating. It is a bad idea to try to take winner take all type of mentality.
Then you get lazy.
Mike, not only that, people won't adopt it.
Yeah. Mike, I want to ask, so Venmo has always been kind of a favorite of mine. It really hit me as one of the few apps where I could explain it to someone who does not care at all about technology or apps on their phone. They probably just got the iPhone as a present from their parents over Christmas. And you tell them about Venmo, and there's always a little skepticism about how you can pay people with your phone, right? They're not comfortable with it. But then I always come back, a week, 2 weeks later, and people are actively using it. It's one of the few apps I've seen that really, really, really took off. What was sort of the story? What was like when you got involved? I mean, how did they sort of come from the ground up? Because the idea wasn't obvious. I mean, I never felt like 6 years ago that there was a huge vacancy in my life with the ability to pay people, peer to peer, but they come off and they absolutely explode with a fantastic product. Like what was the origin there?
Yeah. So to caveat, I will readily admit, so I came, onto the scene at Venmo after the founding, in fact, years after.
Sure.
And the company was part of Braintree by the time I joined, but so Cortina and Ikram, I think, just did an amazing job of nailing, and the team, of nailing a consumer experience. Seeing a need almost before, like, the technology was ready for it. I think the original idea was tied, and I think Cortina's written an essay on this, was tied to text messaging, money to folks, and. I think obviously the killer app was turning payments and P2P payments into an app-based experience that was just dead simple, and turning it into a verb and literally making it so beautiful, so simple, and really fun. I think people make light of the social aspect of Venmo and say, hey, who would want to write a note or have a payment be public or social? When Cortina rightfully pointed out, like, paying is typically one of the most social things you do. You're paying a friend back, you're sharing a meal, you're sharing a cab. So the problem they identified was, particularly amongst a younger set, folks who were doing lots of group activities, there was constant needs, multiple times per week, to split bills and money moving in this really interesting social network. And just started by solving a very simple, intimate problem, which is paying a friend in a very, very clear, concise way, with ultimately what turned out to be a really differentiated twist, which was the social element. And look, you see every single messaging platform today now trying to move in the other direction. So saying, hey, we have a social environment, let's add payments,
Facebook,
whereas Venmo,
right?
yeah. All of the Asian origination messaging platforms, so I think that it's definitely something where it's clear now that there's a number of payments use cases that are high frequency that are social. Now, is P2P payments in and of itself a huge standalone business? And was it ever contemplated in that manner? I don't believe so. It's about finding payments use cases that enable you to become to develop a relationship with the consumer and then spread that brand out that people love into other use cases that do have a strong business case.
Let me ask this, Mike. So I have the Venmo app open now, and I'm curious. You make a good point. You say the Venmo made it into a verb, right? You Venmo people. You don't pay them on your phone using Venmo, and that's brilliant, absolutely brilliant to get people to remember to use it. But as I'm sifting through the publicly displayed comments and things, it really appears. So I'll read a couple. Right, one is a payment for not candy. One is for an emoji of a dinosaur. One is for an emoji of a shower. One's like a fart symbol. There's Uber, something in different language. It almost appears that it's a game aspect as opposed to a useful part of the payment exchange. Was it kind of something that got people to be comfortable using the app, or I feel like there's got to be a subtle difference that really sticks to comments because I use them. They're fun to use. You throw anything in there, and oftentimes it's just not serious. But I wonder if that was their game plan from the beginning to get people to think about payments differently.
Yeah, and I think you ask individual. Well, there's no question that was the game plan, and there's no question that Cortina and Ikram are two very, very unique individuals with a really great viewpoint on payments in the world. But I think that what they did is they created a platform that people use in different ways. Like I write very literal. This is the way my brain works. I write very literal payments messages. I believe if you look into my feed, other people don't. But again, it's just part of the fact most of the payments that are happening that are P2P are social and giving folks the ability to put that expression there. And again, the original premise was this was going to be part of a text message, so there should be some context there. And I think the app-based paradigm and the stream is a little different than the very, very, very initial imagination.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's bridge this. So you're in Google, and obviously Wallet had taken off. What made you reach out to Braintree? I guess was your next move. What was the excitement there? Was it Venmo? Was it the Braintree idea?
So it was a couple things. One is Braintree was a company that was in the segment of mobile payments that I still today think gets far less attention relative to the importance, which is the on-device mobile payments segment. So in other words, verticals where you're actually paying on the device for a good or service that's fulfilled in the real world.
Like Uber
services, Uber, Hotel Tonight, Seamless, Instacart, or just your normal shopping. Amazon does a huge mobile business. Walmart does. Walmart said fascinating things like in Q4 or over the holidays, 10% of their mobile on-device sales came from inside their own stores. People buying stuff
crazy.
They can buy a store. It's nuts. So
I couldn't believe that.
Stunning, right? So that segment is. It was clear to me, when I was looking to potentially leave Google and go to an earlier stage company, a high growth company. I loved working on a high growth business at Google, but wanted to really focus, and that's why I was looking at companies like Braintree. They were in the sector that Google was moving towards, on-device payments with Google Wallet, Instant Buy, and seeing a lot of success. And Braintree works with the best merchants in the world, right? So they process payments for Airbnb, for Uber, for Dropbox, for Eventbrite, for Slack. They're just a phenomenal company.
Now that's an aggressive
great team.
That's an aggressive sector, right? Because they're competing right up against Stripe, right? And we got Stripe, which is a brilliant company. Patrick and John are incredible leaders. That must be, you were in a belly of the beast at the time when all the stuff
merchants are lucky. if you're creating a mobile commerce business today, you have fantastic options, right? Like the infrastructure is in place, and it's up to you. Like you can collect payments, you can pay out, you can do anything from that front. Both Braintree and Stripe plug easily into a number of other service providers that provide other business functions. So there's never been a better time to start a mobile commerce business. It's never been easier. You don't have to take a month to get a merchant account.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. You're inside of Braintree. It is exploding. You got Venmo. Everything's going on. Tell us what happened. I guess maybe Bill already came down when you heard that you were going to be merging with PayPal. I'll call it you were going to acquire PayPal because that's what it really should be. You're merging with PayPal. What happened? Tell me that story if you can, the experience.
So I can just say that, look, it was an exciting time and is an exciting time to be at Braintree, right? And I think like PayPal has tremendous resources. If you look at, I think 150 million consumer accounts.
Yeah.
The piece of the business that Braintree, they're just such complementary businesses. PayPal and Braintree.
But Mike, you were there, right? You were there inside this dynamic company. How did it feel when you first heard it? I mean, how did you hear about it, if you can share? I mean, was it somebody sent a text message, holy cow, where PayPal is going to acquire us, or Square's trying to acquire us, but PayPal's going to win? Or how did that all, I won't go too far into that, but how did it all play out?
So, I mean, Bill is very transparent about, the process. And,
cool.
Look, he explained the rationale and like I said, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I think you see that today with this company. Like Braintree continues to win fantastic, merchant accounts, both, new developers as well as large businesses. They now have the resources of PayPal to add incremental value to a merchant. So they can say, hey, look, we'll process your payments, and we can add, PayPal Touch. So you can do, one-touch payments to improve your conversion, and you can accept PayPal all with one integration. Like the V0 SDK that Braintree released, I think about a quarter ago. I mean, I think that tells you how much sense this made for both parties. And that's the way that Bill explained it. And I think he's spot on.
Now, you had high horsepower developers inside of Braintree and Venmo. What was it like being around those guys? I mean, they just seem like they really know their stuff. I mean, they were really ahead of the curve on a lot of this. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think when Braintree was founded, it was founded as a very traditional, trying to make merchant processing a little bit easier back in 2007. This is really pre-aggressive mobile payments. It was an e-commerce company, and
it was a stone age. Authorized.net dominated. It was a different time.
So just look, it was a remarkable engineering team. I came in well along in the Braintree story, but I think it's pretty obvious that those folks, and what a high leverage team. I was like the 100th employee 5 years on. So 100 people created, or 120th employee. I mean, just a really focused team created just a tremendous amount of value. And again, you see that happening, like you said, with Stripe and other companies. It's remarkable, the engineering talent and how much value, like a very focused group of exceptional engineers and designers and product folks focused on a big need can create. So look, we're trying to do the same thing at Button, and in terms of connecting these apps together now. Folks have.
Let's focus on that. So you left the Braintree, PayPal, and you went and you formed with, I think, some brilliant individuals. Let's talk about Button. Who is Button? What is your mission? The whole thing. Explain it like we don't even know what payments are and what app layers are or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So on one of the recent, I think it was like the Q3 earnings call, Mark Zuckerberg, basically said, and I can't remember which way he said it. If he said, look, advertising is just a payments business, or payments is just an advertising business. At the end of the day, these things are super intertwined. So for the past 5 years, everything I've done in payments has been, really thinking about the full stack, and quote unquote, closing the loop between consumer intent, this is what Google's obviously their business model is taking consumer intent and matching it and fulfilling it, right? So I'm looking for something, I'm searching for something, and increasingly I'm doing other things, watching a video, I'm on my calendar, I'm on maps, and getting me information, sometimes organic, sometimes paid, to get me to purchase or fulfill my need. So, everything I've done in payments and all the projects I've worked on have had an advertising component, either immediately or via the merchants that we enabled and worked with. So, post-acquisition by PayPal, was looking at, hey, what other problems are there that need to be solved in the mobile commerce ecosystem? And feeling like, look, at the high end of the funnel, there's huge, mobile advertising platforms, the app stores themselves, Google, Facebook, and a host of others, ad networks. At the bottom of funnel, we've talked about all the great mobile payments companies and the platforms that exist for folks to get their businesses started. But it was kind of this like middle of funnel. So, hey, I've acquired a customer. How do I make their experience more valuable? And how do I foster customer loyalty and just a great experience? And felt like that was a really ripe opportunity for a new company. And it gets to what we were talking about with like loyalty and Apple, and it's really hard to quote unquote platform that stuff. So we created Button, towards the beginning of 2014, just a phenomenal team. Our CEO, Mike Ciccone, comes from Rakuten. He sold the company to Rakuten, the large Japanese company, and ran Rakuten Loyalty here in the U.S. So he has a loyalty background. Our head of ops, Tanner Hackett, worked at Rocket Internet and led their Lazada business in Malaysia. We have the lead iOS engineer from Venmo, Chris Mattern, one of the original Google Wallet engineers, and Mike Wakerly. Just a phenomenal team. Focused, so again, with all this payments and loyalty and operations experience and e-commerce experience, focused on this middle layer. So I've acquired a customer. How do I create a great experience? And what we saw as a massive opportunity was breaking down single app silos and really extending individual app experiences into complementary apps or other apps. So, hey, I've booked a reservation, with Resi to eat out tonight. I'm going to call an Uber. I have to take a car to get there. Why don't I just link those two experiences? So we created a product called the Deep Link Commerce product, and we actually do an installation of the app that we're sending traffic to. So in this case, you book a table, call an Uber. If I want to install Uber, we can actually bring that experience into Resi, the originating app, to cut out some steps. We tie those apps together, and we create just a great experience for the consumer. We link two apps together, and you can have a whole evening out. We think this is going to be applicable across a broad range of commerce segments. And we want to be the company that helps apps, particularly in the commerce space, work together.
Now, Mike, I just think this idea is absolutely brilliant. To me, it's almost one of those things where when you first hear it, you're like, why didn't anybody else think of this or do it? Do you see a lot of people coming into this space? What are the challenges that you're facing to make this all work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the notion and the focus on on commerce is unique to Button. I think that there's no question that other companies like Google themselves and Facebook and startups, have recognized, hey, we need to, link together, apps and build connections and bridges like what exists on the web. Where we've tried to focus though is really on the problem that Google and really we think everybody's trying to solve. Again, the problem I say at the beginning that advertising is a payments business is like everything ends in a transaction. So how do we help people get to that endpoint sooner? And so, that's kind of our insight is really focusing deeply there and then actually bringing some payment technology to bear. So we have a technology called Card Adjust, which means, hey, I'm Uber. I want to incentivize an open table or somebody in another app to use my service. I can actually provide them with some sort of an offer. Today it's a dollar value offer. In the future, it could theoretically be loyalty points. It could be a coupon. And then Button actually does the card adjustment automatically. So the consumer doesn't have to enter in coupon codes and other things like that.
So
that's,
let's freeze there for a second. This is, I think, one of the most important elements where I talk to a lot of people about what you do in the payments world. And again, it's whenever you're doing something so creative and so new, it's hard to explain. I think that is, to me, the crystallization of what Button is about, is this ability to incentivize all of the elements of that particular ecosystem, the consumer, the two merchants that are involved, right? Everybody is winning in that environment. There's no losers.
We believe so. Yeah, if we do this correctly with our partners, and the way folks win is if you really have to have every element, right? You have to have that technology DNA to build seamless technology and have it work at scale in a system that allows apps to work together seamlessly and change campaign parameters and things of that nature. You have to have a good business team to really credibly explain the value add to both sides of this exchange. Hey, I'm helping you acquire traffic versus I'm sending traffic your way. And then you have to have a really strong design ethos, which Button does, right? The connections that we design, we believe are as high quality as the apps that they are residing within. And look, that's essential. It's not easy these days to convince a large established company that's growing fast to embed an SDK, an additional SDK, or to outsource, a function like, customer acquisition or re-engagement. So you have to be tremendously credible across every piece of your business to get the thumbs up from folks to partner with them. And we've been fortunate enough to have Uber and a number of other folks.
Now, Mike, does it look like an affiliate program to some of the merchants involved?
Yes,
right. So
yes, no question.
So now, if I'm an app developer and I've just created this really great app that discovers taco restaurants, right? And I want to be able to get Uber, the Uber API through this. What's the process? Is it a difficult process to integrate? I mean, I'm putting an API. Uber's already opened their API to allow this to flow into my app. Is that correct? You've already partnered with them.
We're complementary to Uber in the sense that, look, they have a fantastic API that a developer can absolutely build to. The value out of working with Button is we make that, we'll package it up and get it done in like literally like hours versus, potentially days. And then, once we've built this connection for a developer, like we are maintaining this and really giving it great attention, ensuring it's optimized. And we have other connections to point to see if it's working or not working. We have a great design team. And, the other piece is that we connect on both sides of the network to multiple APIs, right? So, let's say you're an app like, one of the NBA team apps, for example.
Sure.
And I'm the New York Knicks app. And there's a few things I want to do. I want to sell tickets to people. So I might want to partner with Ticketmaster, StubHub, or SeatGeek. Hey, people might want to grab dinner, before they come see the game. So I might want to partner with OpenTable or Resy. And people want to take an Uber to get where they're going. So I might want to partner with Uber. The NBA, the benefit to them is, like they can embed one, they can basically do one partnership with Button and, theoretically get connections to companies in all of those verticals. And again, with the tender loving care that Button can give, where we pay deep attention to how these things are working and we optimize them so that these app connections don't, 6 or 12 months down the road become a, forgotten feature, which sometimes happens as companies are growing and building fast.
Right.
This is phenomenal. Now, can we talk about revenue to Button? How does Button profit in this arrangement?
So it would be your, as you suspect, an affiliate model.
Sure.
Where, hey, I'm receiving an incremental ride, an incremental ticket sale, an incremental seating dinner reservation. I'm willing to pay, some percentage of sales or some, bounty amount for that transaction. And that gets, paid to Button, who then shares that with our partners who have sent the traffic.
Have you found resistance?
We've found people have embraced this. Yeah. I mean, I
love it.
The key here is saying, like, look, this is how much you're spending right now to acquire and re-engage new customers on Facebook, on Google, on Twitter. Or you tell us, right? I mean, we've seen all the studies, but let's talk about your individual spend. Hey, then let's just pencil out what this looks like in terms of affiliate fee with no risk up front, right? basically a no risk placement in a really complimentary way. And we're doing high quality work. I'm not bashful about saying that. So people are liking it,
That's awesome.
Mike, I'm curious, where does this sort of look like what does this look like in the future? If you fast forward the tape, do they open the Button app in the future and have an interaction where they can see all the different paths they can take for the night? For instance, you could take a Uber to a 5-star restaurant in, Mission, and you kind of sign up for that route. Could you commit to multiple merchants at a time with a consumer in exchange for some discount? Are there other ideas that you guys think are really interesting to think about and potentially one day would become a reality that aren't true today?
Yeah, look, that's one that the scenario you laid out is one that's really exciting to us. So Scott Belsky wrote, I forget the name of the piece, but just a phenomenal blog post on the interface layer between the consumer and the apps that can kind of fulfill the needs that they have. And we certainly have the ambition to be that interface layer and really help. Whether that takes the form of a consumer-facing brand or not, I think really just depends on consumer behavior that we're going to watch. But we're really just enabler. We don't provide any direct fulfillment services. There's great companies out there in any vertical that you can think of. And our idea and our premise is to connect folks in one app where they have expressed intent to another app that can fulfill that.
So we have to draw Faisal in because Faisal is our international expert, whether he likes to admit it or not. Faisal, what's your takeaway in terms of how does this work in your part of the world or whatever you're thinking?
Well, we don't have this. We don't have this in my part of the world. But I had a question of Mike. Do you think this would eventually become something like of a mainstream technology, just like the API is that you have apps talking to each other, and the whole experience, like you are trying to bundle it, would maybe somewhere down the years would just be a normal thing. What's your take on this thing?
I hope so. Like I think that Apple will allow apps to become more and more open and communicate with one another. They've started to do that with extensions, and I think eventually they'll make it easier to do the things that we're talking about.
Because when I first saw your usebutton.com website, I was like, okay, I really couldn't get it what you were trying to do. And then it just hit me. And when it hits you, I'm saying, my God, these guys are on the edge of something really super and something, and really like what, Brian said, why didn't we think of this earlier? It was a fantastic product. So, good luck on that. And I think there's a lot of potential in what you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I think that, counter to your point, I think this is something that goes international. In fact, we're already talking with multiple folks about international implementations of exactly what we just discussed, because it's less. Look, there aren't the regulatory and the ecosystem challenges that you have in pure payments. We're really connecting two apps together, and the partners that we work with, some of them are global, and so we have ambitions to be this year in a number of different countries facilitating connections.
Now, Mike, how far out do you see these tendrils, these branches going out? Like, I can start extrapolating that, one single app can actually reach out to individual products. Like, hey, I want to have wine in the Uber on my way there, so I can stop by here. How far out are you guys extrapolating on this? Is there a limit, or does it get just kind of wacky and impractical as it goes too far out?
No, I think you can get to that level. And look, some of that will have to be fulfilled within the service itself as you get to really, really niche use cases. But, today you're seeing some really exciting, some app connections that are, very deep already, where, I'll give you the one example recently, but Yummly and Instacart, which was, direct integration that those two apps did. But Yummly is a, food and recipe app, and it's a phenomenal one. They integrated with Instacart's API so that, I can select a recipe that I've been looking at, that I'm excited about, that I want to basically cook tonight, and with a touch of a button, I basically can tap. If I have Instacart installed, great. It basically populates my order with all those ingredients directly over to the Instacart app. If I don't, it will do an installation for me and still port over that information. So the intelligence is in both apps, right? There's that sort of recipe and language translation service that Yumly has. There's the taxonomy and the API that Instacart has to recognize that and then fulfill it. It's like stuff that is seemingly magical but accessible today, and now it's just a matter of extending that, I think, into more environments, because I think every app should have that functionality.
Mike, as a marketer, I'm freaking out over here because you have brand specification. You have brand specification that could take place, right? So if I'm baking a cake, I can literally specify the brand of sugar, the brand of vanilla, and the opportunity to work with packaged good companies. And it's there's tremendous layers that can be built into this. Are you examining that aspect, or is that?
Yeah, so we're examining it, but today we're really focused on building what I would call the pipes, or the the highway, and then you're going to have a lot of ways that people can get to different destinations that will be built on top of that. But APIs, there really wasn't. If you go back to even just 10 months ago or 12 months ago when Button was formed, there weren't these. Like Uber only released their API in 2014. Postmates did the same. Delivery.com has a great API, and so you're starting to see, right? It's what these apps make accessible is really the limit of what you can do today. But that's the barriers are being broken down and the functionality is being exposed, and it's really exciting to see companies that have been formed only in the last handful of years do more, let's say, than companies that have been in the same space for decades, right?
So you see this as really as a mechanism to empower this whole app economy, this on-demand economy, right? Because it almost to me becomes
on demand. Yeah, I mean, starting with on demand, but getting into a whole range of segments. The reason, look, on demand is a really exciting one because of the high growth, the frequency of usage. It's a great place to start. But I think the idea of app connections is going to touch every segment of apps and particularly in commerce and really given the power of a mobile device and that just kind of goes to sensors and other elements and things in the real world that we've talked about, like beacons, is going to make the mobile computing experience and commerce experience just so much more powerful than anything we've ever experienced in e-commerce. So
Mike, I'm curious. So say I'm an app developer and I'm considering what apps to give discounts to, right? Should I give the Uber, should I show up with what type of app should pop up for my users? Is there differentiation between the users that are using the app to the promo code or discount code that they see?
Yeah,
and then behind the scenes, does it exist yet where there's a whole Google Analytics version of, where traffic is coming from, where credits are using, where they're going afterwards? Is that built yet, or are you guys planning on building it?
Yes. Now it's not as I'd love to say it's as beautiful as Google Analytics today, but it's somewhat custom and customer specific. But it's that powerful, both on the analytics side, and then on the campaign, we'll call it campaign management. But look, this is a commerce network.
I mean, this is a huge thing, because this is essentially for every app developer. You shouldn't not do this, right? Is it what? Unless you're...
There's no downside.
I
don't see a downside.
It almost makes me feel that this would eventually become something like an API framework, independent, that everyone would start using, maybe a couple of years down the road. Yeah, there's been
talk, absolutely.
Kind of like what Zapier does to connect apps. Could you do that here?
Yeah, and people have likened it to IFT. I think that's where we try to differentiate, and I think we do on some of the technology around cart adjustment, around design today, around crafting beautiful, thoughtful placements and experiences, as well as building great technology that's highly functional. And again, to the point you raised earlier, having that analytics on the back end, having the campaign management tracking on the front end, and then all the things that I saw make Braintree successful. So really great customer support and account management. I can't understate how important that is to making an ecosystem like this work. APIs are fantastic, but APIs without support and management, education, documentation, good luck.
Mike, I got two big questions here. Do you actually calculate cost to acquire customer? I mean, are we getting down to that level? Can you say that this customer costs you X versus Y in prior incarnations?
Yeah, and furthermore, you can, because you're not, yes, and because you're not committing to, like, this isn't like advertising where you have to pre-commit to, you know, $100,000 buy before doing it. You can tune this as you go. So, you know, we can make really good estimates based on previous integrations with other partners on a broad basis, and then tune and refine as we see real data. And that's the beauty of the kind of quote unquote affiliate model of these app connections.
So how does a developer start? I mean, because, you know, do they come to you as sort of like a marketplace and say, what should I connect? The guidance of what the connections would be for my app. Who's helping me with that? Do you have is this automated in some way?
Today it's operational. And then, you know, over time we hope to automate. I think people overestimate what you can make automated, you know, at the outset of a business. So we are, you know, we're pretty focused on making suggestions and you know, introductions today. Again, like you could automate this, but it's a new concept. You know, I think as Faisal said, look, I looked at your website and I wasn't 100% certain, you know, how this works. So, you know, we're out there, so we're telling the story.
You know,
getting folks excited about this.
I almost had if I had to explain it to someone, I would say, you know, this is something like an app router. You know, taking information from one app and just bringing it to the other in the most logical sense, and finding them. Yeah, exactly. But like I said, once it hits you, you really understand the power of what Mike's doing.
Yeah, I think the one of the exciting things would be, you know, as a follow up to this conversation, would be to have a discussion with Chris Mattern, you know, who's a Button co-founder, and you know, on our engineering side. About some of the same things we've talked about, because like he's got brilliant ideas. He has brilliant ideas about this, and kind of you know, to think about it from the business. I'm sorry, from an engineering and technical perspective. Versus
that'd be a good take on it. So
absolutely,
you're the chief revenue officer. So you're the guy who brings in the dollars.
Yeah. So you know, Chris and Mikey and team build and I sell the great products that they build.
Awesome, Mike. Hey, man, we were so excited to have you on. So excited for what you're doing there.
This is amazing.
Would love to set up another one in the future.
Thank you for coming. Is really appreciated.
All right. Thank you guys for the
honor
time.
To have
really
you.
Appreciate it as well.
Thanks,
Have
Mike.
a great rest of your Sunday. All right. Cheers, guys.
You too, Mike. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.